The day my daughter announced she had found the perfect place for me to live out my remaining years, I was sitting on signed purchase agreements for 3 nursing homes, 2 assisted living facilities, and the corporate headquarters of the healthcare company that employed her husband. My name is Betty, and at 75 years old, I had apparently become a problem that needed managing, not a person who needed consulting, not a family member whose opinion mattered, but a problem with a convenient, expensive solution that my daughter Linda and her husband Marcus had researched thoroughly without ever asking what I thought about any of it. "Mom, we need to talk," Linda said as she settled into my living room with the kind of serious expression usually reserved for terminal diagnoses or financial disasters. She was carrying a leather portfolio that I suspected contained brochures, cost analyses, and decision trees that reduced my life to a series of practical considerations. Marcus sat beside her with his laptop open, ready to present what I assumed would be a PowerPoint presentation about my declining capabilities and their recommended solutions. He worked as a senior administrator for Medcare Solutions, one of the largest healthcare management companies in the region, specializing in elder care facilities. His professional expertise in managing aging populations apparently qualified him to manage his aging mother-in-law. "Your father and I have been discussing your situation," Linda began, "and we think it's time to consider some changes." My situation, as if being 75 and living independently in the house I had owned for 30 years, was a medical condition requiring intervention. "What kind of changes?" I asked. Though I already knew the answer, I had been expecting this conversation ever since my neighbor had mentioned seeing Linda and Marcus taking photographs of my house from the street, probably documenting evidence of my supposed inability to maintain my property. "Well, for starters, this house is too big for you now. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a full kitchen that you barely use. It's not practical for someone at your stage of life." My stage of life. Another clinical term that reduced 7.5 decades of experience, wisdom and independence to a demographic category that required management by people who thought they understood aging better than someone who was actually living it. Marcus opened his laptop and angled the screen so I could see what appeared to be a professionally prepared presentation titled Care Options for Senior Independence. "Betty, I've used my connections in the healthcare industry to research the best facilities in the area," he said with the tone of someone who expected gratitude for solving a problem I didn't know I had. "There are some excellent options that would provide you with social interaction, medical supervision, and relief from the burden of home maintenance." Burden. Home maintenance had become a burden rather than a source of pride and accomplishment. "I want to show you Sunset Manor," Linda said, pulling out a glossy brochure that looked like marketing material for a luxury resort rather than a place where people went to die. "It's the premier assisted living facility in the state. They have a waiting list that's usually 2 years long, but Marcus was able to get you priority placement." Priority placement. Because my son-in-law's professional connections could expedite my transition from independent adult to managed care recipient. I looked at the brochure, noting the carefully staged photographs of smiling elderly residents engaged in activities that were designed to look meaningful but felt more like organized time-filling. There were pictures of art classes where people painted flowers, exercise programs that looked like physical therapy disguised as recreation, and dining rooms that resembled hospital cafeterias, decorated to look homelike. "The cost is substantial," Marcus continued, consulting spreadsheets on his laptop, "but we've analyzed your financial situation, and between your Social Security, Medicare, and the equity in this house, it's manageable. We would need to sell the house to cover the entrance fee and ongoing monthly costs." They had analyzed my financial situation. Without asking me, without consulting my bank statements or investment portfolios, without knowing anything about my actual assets or income, they had made assumptions about my ability to pay for the life they were planning for me. But here's what Linda and Marcus didn't know about my financial situation. Here's what they had failed to discover during their research and analysis and professional consultation. I wasn't just financially capable of affording premium assisted living care. I was financially capable of owning the entire industry. For the past 10 years, since my husband Robert's death, had left me with substantial life insurance proceeds and investment accounts that I had never discussed with my children, I had been quietly building a portfolio of healthcare and real estate investments that had made me wealthier than anyone in my family could imagine. The nursing homes and assisted living facilities that Marcus was recommending, I had been acquiring them systematically, buying struggling facilities and turning them into profitable, high-quality care centers that actually served their residents instead of just warehousing them. The healthcare management company where Marcus worked? Medcare Solutions had been one of my targeted acquisitions, and as of this morning, I owned controlling interest in the company that employed my son-in-law. Linda, I said, setting down the Sunset Manor brochure, this is very thoughtful of you both. But I need to ask you something important. Of course, Mom. What is it? Have either of you ever asked me what I want? Have you asked whether I'm happy living in my own home? Have you asked whether I feel unsafe or incapable or burdened by my current life? Linda and Marcus exchanged glances, the kind of look that passes between people who think they're dealing with someone whose opinions are no longer relevant to practical decision-making. Mom, of course we care what you want. But sometimes what we want isn't what's best for us. Sometimes we need other people to help us make difficult decisions. Sometimes we need other people to make decisions for us. Because at 75, I had apparently lost the capacity for rational judgment about my own life, my own needs, my own future. Linda, what if I told you that I don't need you to make decisions for me? What if I told you that I'm perfectly capable of managing my own life, my own finances, and my own care needs? Mom, we're not trying to control your life. We're trying to protect you. Protect me. From what? From the danger of living independently? From the risk of making my own choices? From the possibility that I might actually know what was best for my own life? Marcus leaned forward with his most professional, consultation room expression. Betty, I see this situation frequently in my work, adult children who wait too long to address their parents' changing needs, and elderly adults who resist necessary changes because they're afraid of losing independence. And what do you recommend in those situations, Marcus? Honest conversation about practical realities, clear assessment of capabilities and limitations, and sometimes, difficult decisions that prioritize safety over preferences. Safety over preferences. My preferences for how to live my own life were now obstacles to overcome, rather than factors to consider. Marcus, can I ask you something about your professional experience? Of course. In your work with Medcare Solutions, how much do you know about the ownership structure of the company? Do you know who makes the major financial decisions? Do you know who determines policy for the facilities your company manages? Marcus looked puzzled by the change of subject. The company is privately held, but I don't really deal with ownership issues. I focus on operational management of individual facilities. That's interesting, because as of this morning, I'm very familiar with Medcare Solutions' ownership structure. Linda looked confused. Mom, what does that have to do with anything? I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out the folder containing the purchase agreements that my lawyer had delivered just hours before Linda's arrival. The timing had been perfect, almost poetic in its coincidence. It has everything to do with this conversation, Linda, because the company that employs Marcus, the facilities he's recommending for my care, and the entire healthcare portfolio you've researched for my future, I now own all of it. The silence that followed was the silence of people whose entire understanding of a situation had just been fundamentally challenged. But I wasn't finished. I was just getting started. The folder I had pulled from my desk contained more than just purchase agreements. It contained 10 years of careful investment strategy, systematic acquisition of undervalued healthcare properties, and the gradual assembly of what had become one of the largest privately owned eldercare networks in the region. Mom, what are you talking about? Linda's voice carried the careful tone of someone who was beginning to worry that her elderly parent was experiencing some kind of delusional episode. I spread the documents across my coffee table, the same coffee table where Linda had placed her brochures about my need for managed care, purchase agreements for Sunset Manor, Riverside Gardens, Golden Years Residence, and 4 other premium facilities, stock certificates showing controlling interest in Medcare Solutions, financial statements showing a portfolio worth more than $8 million. I'm talking about the fact that while you've been researching where to put me, I've been buying the places you were considering. Marcus stared at the documents with the expression of someone trying to process information that didn't fit any familiar categories. Betty, these look like major corporate acquisitions. They are major corporate acquisitions, Marcus. And as of today, you work for me. I work for you? Medcare Solutions is now a subsidiary of Chen Healthcare Holdings, which is a company I established 5 years ago to manage my growing portfolio of healthcare properties. Linda picked up one of the purchase agreements, reading it with the careful attention of someone who was hoping to find evidence that this was all some kind of misunderstanding or elaborate joke. Mom, this says you purchased Sunset Manor yesterday for $6.2 million. That's correct. But where? How? "Mom, you don't have $6 million." That was the assumption that had driven this entire intervention. The assumption that I was not just physically and mentally declining, but financially vulnerable, unable to afford the care that my loving family was trying to arrange for me. "Linda, I need to tell you some things about your father's financial planning and my investment management over the past decade." Robert had been more than just a loving husband. He had been a brilliant financial planner who had left me not just with life insurance proceeds, but with a detailed strategy for turning those proceeds into generational wealth through real estate and healthcare investments. When he died 10 years ago, I had inherited not just his life insurance policies, but his investment accounts, his business partnerships, and his carefully researched plan for acquiring undervalued healthcare properties in anticipation of the aging baby boomer population. Your father spent years researching healthcare demographics and real estate trends. He knew that elder care would become one of the most profitable and socially important industries in the country. Dad was interested in healthcare investing. Dad was interested in creating financial security for his family that would last generations. And he was particularly interested in improving the quality of elder care by owning facilities that could prioritize patient welfare over profit maximization. I pulled out another folder, this one containing the detailed investment strategy Robert had developed, and I had been implementing systematically since his death. Robert identified healthcare as an industry where doing good and making money were not just compatible, but mutually reinforcing. Better care leads to better outcomes, which leads to better reputations, which leads to higher occupancy rates and premium pricing. Marcus was studying the financial statements with professional interest, his earlier assumption about my need for managed care replaced by fascination with the business model I had been quietly executing. "Betty, these numbers are extraordinary. You've built a healthcare empire." "I've built what Robert designed, Marcus. A network of facilities that provides excellent care while generating sustainable profits that can fund expansion and improvement." "But why didn't you tell us about any of this?" Linda asked, still processing the disconnect between her assumptions about her mother's capabilities and the evidence spread across my coffee table. "Because I wanted to see what you would do, Linda. I wanted to understand whether your concern for my welfare was based on love and respect for my autonomy, or on assumptions about my declining capabilities and your responsibility to manage my life." The truth was more complicated than what I was telling Linda, but it was also more painful, and I wasn't sure she was ready to hear it yet. The truth was that I had tested my family's attitudes toward aging, independence, and decision-making by deliberately hiding my financial success and allowing them to see only what confirmed their stereotypes about elderly decline. The truth was that I had discovered that my daughter's love came with conditions, assumptions, and a need to control that became stronger as she perceived me becoming weaker. The truth was that Robert and I had planned this test, knowing that it would reveal whether our family would honor our autonomy or try to manage us as we aged. "Linda, let me ask you something. If you had known about my financial situation, would you still have recommended that I move to assisted living?" Linda considered the question carefully. I don't know, Mom. I suppose not." "Why not?" "Because if you have the resources to maintain your independence, then independence makes more sense." "So your recommendation was based not on my actual capabilities or needs, but on your assumptions about my financial limitations." "I guess, yes, that's true." "And Marcus, if you had known that I owned the company you work for, would you have approached this conversation differently?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Probably. Yes, I would have been more interested in your business perspective on the healthcare industry instead of just your personal care needs." "So both of your approaches to this conversation were based on assumptions about my resources and capabilities rather than actual knowledge of my situation." They both acknowledged that this was true. But here's what I still hadn't told them. Here's the information that would complete their understanding of exactly how much their assumptions had underestimated me. The facilities I had acquired weren't just profitable investments. They were laboratories for developing better approaches to elder care, places where I had been implementing innovative programs that addressed not just medical needs, but social, intellectual, and creative needs of aging adults. The Sunset Manor that Linda had recommended? I had purchased it specifically because its previous ownership had been focused on cost-cutting rather than quality care. I was in the process of transforming it into a model facility that would demonstrate how premium elder care could be both profitable and genuinely life-enhancing. And Medcare Solutions, the company that employed Marcus? I had acquired it because I needed professional management infrastructure to implement my vision for elder care across multiple facilities. Marcus, I said, starting tomorrow you're going to have some new responsibilities. What kind of responsibilities? You're going to help me transform the elder care industry, one facility at a time. The next morning, Marcus arrived at my house at 7 a.m., carrying a briefcase and wearing the expression of someone who had spent the entire night recalibrating his understanding of his family situation, his professional circumstances, and his mother-in-law's capabilities. Betty, I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I have a lot of questions. Good? Questions are the beginning of understanding. I led him into my home office, which I had deliberately kept hidden from both Linda and Marcus during their previous visits. The office occupied what had been Robert's study, converted into a command center for managing a multi-million-dollar healthcare portfolio. 3 large monitors displayed real-time occupancy rates, financial performance metrics, and operational data from each of my facilities. Digital dashboards showed everything from patient satisfaction scores to staff retention rates to regulatory compliance status across my entire network. Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered, looking around the room. Betty, this is more sophisticated than the corporate offices at Medcare. That's because Medcare's previous ownership was more interested in extracting profits than optimizing operations. We're going to change that. I pulled up the master plan Robert and I had developed for revolutionizing elder care through a combination of premium amenities, innovative programming, and resident-centered design that treated aging adults as clients rather than patients. Marcus, what's wrong with most assisted living facilities? Where do I start? Institutional feel, limited programming, staff-to-resident ratios that prioritize cost savings over individual attention, medical focus that ignores social and intellectual needs. Exactly. And what would facilities look like if they were designed by people who actually wanted to live in them rather than people who just wanted to profit from them? Marcus studied the plans I was showing him, architectural drawings for facility renovations that included art studios, professional kitchens for cooking classes, libraries with rare book collections, meditation gardens, and performance spaces for resident-produced theater and music. These look like luxury resorts, not nursing homes. That's the point, Marcus. Why should aging be associated with institutional living and managed decline? Why can't elder care facilities be places where people thrive intellectually and socially instead of just receiving medical maintenance? I showed him the programming plans Robert and I had developed, university-level courses taught by retired professors, artist residency programs where professional creators worked alongside residents, intergenerational mentorship programs that connected residents with young professionals seeking wisdom and experience. Betty, this is extraordinary. But the costs? The costs are justified by the outcomes, Marcus. Premium programming attracts premium residents who can afford premium pricing. Excellence in elder care isn't just morally right, it's financially smart. I pulled up the financial projections showing how facilities that invested in resident experience could command fees that were 30 to 50% higher than traditional elder care, while maintaining waiting lists of potential residents. But more importantly, Marcus, this model creates a positive cycle. Better programming attracts better staff. Better staff provides better care. Better care creates better outcomes. Better outcomes justify premium pricing. Premium pricing funds even better programming. Marcus was taking notes as I explained the business model, but I could see that he was processing more than just financial information. He was processing the realization that his mother-in-law had been thinking about elder care at a level of sophistication that exceeded anything he had encountered in his professional career. Betty, how long have you been developing this model? Robert and I started planning this 15 years ago, when we were both in our early 60s and beginning to think seriously about our own aging process. So you've been preparing for your own elder care needs by revolutionizing the entire industry? We've been preparing to age with dignity, purpose, and joy instead of accepting decline, isolation, and managed care as inevitable. I showed Marcus the crown jewel of my portfolio, a facility that was still under construction, designed from the ground up to implement every innovation Robert and I had envisioned. The Meridian Center would be part assisted living facility, part university campus, part artist colony, and part research center. Residents will have private apartments with full kitchens, but also access to communal spaces designed for collaboration and learning. They'll have medical care available, but also opportunities to teach, create, mentor, and contribute to their communities. And this is profitable. Marcus, we have a waiting list of over 300 people for a facility that won't open for another year. The entrance fee is $200,000, and monthly fees range from $8,000 to $12,000, depending on apartment size and service level. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the scope and ambition of what I had been building. Betty, why didn't you include Linda and me in this planning? Why did you let us think you needed our help when you were obviously way ahead of us in thinking about these issues? That was the question I had been expecting, and it was also the question I wasn't sure I was ready to answer completely honestly. Marcus, let me ask you something. Yesterday, when Linda suggested that I needed managed care, what was your first instinct? To trust her judgment and help implement her recommendations. And when you saw my financial statements and business plans, what was your first instinct? To ask how I could contribute to what you were building. Do you see the difference? Marcus nodded slowly. When we thought you were declining and vulnerable, we wanted to manage you. When we realized you were successful and capable, we wanted to learn from you. Exactly. And that difference reveals something important about how families and society approach aging. We assume decline, dependence, and diminished capacity instead of recognizing continued potential for growth, contribution, and leadership. I pulled out one more folder, this one containing correspondence from universities, government agencies, and healthcare policy organizations that had been consulting with me about elder care innovation and industry transformation. Marcus, I've been invited to speak at Harvard Medical School about aging and independence. The Department of Health and Human Services wants to pilot my programming model in federal facilities. The World Health Organization has asked me to contribute to international guidelines for elder care excellence. You're not just building a business, Betty. You're reshaping how society thinks about aging. That's always been the goal, Marcus. Robert and I never wanted to just accumulate wealth. We wanted to change the experience of aging for ourselves and for everyone who comes after us. So, when Linda and I were planning your care, we were thinking about the problem exactly backward. You were thinking about managing my decline instead of supporting my continued growth. You were thinking about where to put me instead of how to empower me. Marcus closed his notebook and leaned back in his chair. Betty, I owe you an enormous apology. We completely underestimated you. Marcus, you did what most families do. You made assumptions based on age rather than capabilities. You saw problems instead of potential.
But how do we change that?
How do we approach elder care differently going forward? We start by recognizing that aging is not a disease that requires management. It's a stage of life that offers unique opportunities for wisdom, creativity, and contribution. And then we build facilities and programs that honor those opportunities instead of warehousing people who are seen as burdens rather than resources. Marcus was quiet for a moment, processing everything I had shared. Then he asked the question that would determine whether he was ready to be part of the solution I was building. Betty, what do you need from me? How can I help you implement this vision? Finally, someone in my family was asking how they could contribute to my goals instead of how they could manage my supposed problems. It was time to find out whether Marcus was ready to help me change the world. Marcus's first day as my partner in revolutionizing elder care began at Sunset Manor, the facility that Linda had originally recommended for my care and that I had purchased 2 days earlier. The irony wasn't lost on either of us as we walked through the building that had been selected as the place where I should spend my remaining years, but that I now owned and intended to transform. Betty, this place needs serious work, Marcus said as we toured the common areas, dining facilities, and resident rooms that represented everything wrong with traditional approaches to assisted living. The decorating was institutional. Beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and furniture that looked like it had been selected by someone who had never actually sat in a chair or eaten at a table. The activities room displayed a schedule of programming that seemed designed to fill time rather than enrich lives. Bingo twice weekly, movie afternoons featuring films from 40 years ago, and craft sessions that produced objects no one actually wanted to own. The business model is all wrong, Marcus continued, reviewing the operational reports I had obtained during the acquisition process. High staff turnover, minimum wage positions, residents warehoused rather than engaged. No wonder the previous owners wanted to sell. But here's what Marcus was beginning to understand as we walked through the facility. The problems weren't obstacles to profitability. They were opportunities for competitive advantage that most elder care operators had never recognized. Marcus, what do you see when you look at this place? I see a depressing institutional facility that I would never want to live in. Exactly, And what do you think would happen if we transformed it into a place you would want to live in? Demand would increase dramatically. We could charge premium prices. And what kind of staff would want to work in a facility that actually valued both residents and employees? Higher quality people who would stay longer and provide better care. And what kind of residents would choose a facility that offered genuine community, intellectual stimulation, and opportunities for continued growth? People who could afford to pay for excellence and who would recommend the facility to their friends and family. Marcus was beginning to understand the business logic that Robert and I had recognized years earlier. Excellence in eldercare wasn't just morally right, it was financially smart. But only if you were willing to invest in transformation rather than just managing decline. Betty, show me the renovation plans. I pulled out the architectural drawings that my team had been developing for Sunset Manor's transformation. Gone were the institutional corridors and clinical common areas. In their place were residential-style apartments with full kitchens, library spaces with comfortable reading areas, art studios with professional-grade equipment, and dining areas that looked like restaurants rather than cafeterias. The renovation will cost $2 million, I explained, but it will increase the facility's value by $8 million while improving the quality of life for every resident. And the programming? I showed Marcus the detailed plans for transforming Sunset Manor into what we were calling a life enrichment community, a place where aging adults could continue learning, creating, teaching, and contributing instead of just receiving care. University professors would offer courses in literature, history, art, and philosophy. Professional musicians would provide not just entertainment, but instruction for residents who wanted to learn instruments or compose music. Master chefs would teach cooking classes in the new professional kitchen. Master gardeners would work with residents to create community gardens that supplied fresh produce for the facility's restaurant-quality dining program. Marcus, what if eldercare facilities were places people looked forward to living in, rather than places they were sent when they could no longer live anywhere else? Betty, this is brilliant. But the implementation is why I need your professional expertise. I can buy facilities and design programs, but I need someone who understands healthcare operations to manage the day-to-day execution. I offered Marcus something that most people never get in their professional careers: the opportunity to implement their vision of how an industry should work, rather than just managing within existing limitations. Marcus, I'm offering you the position of Chief Operating Officer for Chen Healthcare Holdings. You would be responsible for implementing this transformation model across all of our facilities. What about my current position at Medcare? Medcare is now a subsidiary of Chen Healthcare. Your current responsibilities would expand to include oversight of our entire portfolio, and my current salary would triple, along with equity participation in the business growth you help create. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing the career opportunity that had emerged from what he had initially approached as an intervention for his declining mother-in-law. Betty, can I ask you something personal? Of course. When Linda and I came to you with our concerns about assisted living, were you testing us? The honest answer was yes, but the complete answer was more complex than Marcus was probably ready to hear. Marcus, I was trying to understand whether my family saw me as a person with continued potential or as a problem requiring management. And what did you conclude? I concluded that your love for me was genuine, but your assumptions about aging were limiting your ability to see my continued capabilities. So this entire conversation could have been avoided if we had asked you about your goals and resources, instead of making assumptions about your needs and limitations. That's right, Marcus. The intervention I needed wasn't residential placement. It was recognition that I was building something important and could use family support instead of family management. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Betty, I accept your job offer, but I want to ask for one additional responsibility. What's that? I want to develop training programs for families about how to support aging relatives without undermining their autonomy. I want to prevent other families from making the mistakes Linda and I made. Finally, Marcus had identified the larger mission that Robert and I had always envisioned, changing not just elder care facilities, but societal attitudes toward aging, independence, and family relationships. Marcus, that's exactly what this industry needs. Professional development that addresses not just operational issues, but cultural attitudes that limit what we think is possible for aging adults. As we finished our tour of Sunset Manor, I realized that the facility Linda had originally recommended for my care would indeed become important to my future, not as a place where I would be cared for, but as a flagship demonstration of how elder care could honor dignity, support continued growth, and create community instead of just managing decline. Betty, Marcus said as we prepared to leave, I have one more question. What is it? Does Linda know about any of this yet? Not yet, but she will soon. I'm planning a family dinner where I'll explain not just what I've been building, but how she can be part of it going forward. And if she's interested, then she'll discover that her mother isn't someone who needs managing. She's someone who's been building the solutions that our entire generation is going to need. But first, I had to prepare for a conversation that would either bring my family together around a shared vision for aging with dignity, or reveal that my daughter's concerns had been more about control than love. The next phase of my plan would determine which it was. The family dinner I arranged for the following Sunday was different from any meal we had ever shared. Instead of gathering around Linda's dining table for pot roast and small talk about grandchildren's activities, I invited everyone to dine at Meridian Center's demonstration kitchen, the flagship facility that was still under construction, but whose demonstration areas were complete and functional. Linda arrived with the cautious expression of someone who wasn't sure what to expect from her mother's recent revelations about healthcare investments and corporate acquisitions. She had spent the week processing the information Marcus had shared about my business portfolio, and I suspected she was struggling to reconcile her assumptions about my declining capabilities with evidence of my expanding influence. Mom, this place is beautiful, she said as I gave her a tour of the demonstration areas. It looks more like a luxury hotel than a nursing home. That's intentional, Linda. Robert and I believed that housing for aging adults should be designed by architects who understood elegance, not by institutional designers who prioritized efficiency over dignity. The dining area where we would be eating dinner featured floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking landscaped gardens, a professional kitchen where resident chefs prepared meals using ingredients from the facility's organic farm, and private dining alcoves where families could share meals in restaurant-quality surroundings. But Mom, how can you afford to build something like this?
Linda,
I need to tell you some things about the financial planning your father and I did together, and about the investments I've been making since he died. I had prepared a presentation for Linda, similar to what I had shown Marcus, but more comprehensive, because Linda needed to understand not just my business success, but my strategic thinking about aging, independence, and family relationships. Over the past 10 years, I've invested your father's life insurance proceeds and our retirement savings into healthcare real estate and elder care operations. Chen Healthcare Holdings now owns 12 facilities across 4 states, employs over 600 people, and generates annual revenue of $43 million. Linda sat down heavily in one of the comfortable chairs, her expression shifting from confusion to something approaching shock. Mom, you're telling me you've built a $40 million business while I was worrying about your ability to maintain your house. That's exactly what I'm telling you, Linda. But why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me think you were struggling financially? This was the question I had been preparing to answer, and it was also the most difficult part of the conversation, because it required me to be honest about what I had discovered about my family's attitudes toward aging and independence. Linda, I wanted to see how you would respond to the idea of my aging and potentially needing care. I wanted to understand whether you would approach my future as a problem to be solved or as an opportunity to support my continued autonomy. And what did you conclude? I concluded that your love for me was genuine, but your assumptions about aging prevented you from seeing my continued capabilities and respecting my right to make decisions about my own life. Linda was quiet for several minutes, processing what I had said. Mom, I was trying to protect you. I know, sweetheart. But protection became control when you started making decisions about my future without consulting me about my goals, resources, or preferences. So when Marcus and I recommended assisted living, you were recommending that I accept diminished autonomy and institutional living because you assumed I couldn't afford or manage alternatives. Linda nodded slowly. And all the time, you were building alternatives for yourself and for other people facing the same assumptions. Exactly. Mom, I owe you an enormous apology. We completely underestimated you. Linda, you did what most adult children do. You saw age as limitation rather than opportunity. You saw problems instead of potential. But here's what I hadn't told Linda yet. Here's the information that would complete her understanding of how much her assumptions had underestimated. Not just my capabilities, but my intentions for our family's future. The elder care empire I had built wasn't just my legacy project. It was designed to provide financial security and meaningful work opportunities for my entire family, including Linda herself, if she chose to participate. Linda, I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? I need someone to develop and manage family education programs that help adult children support aging parents without undermining their independence. Linda looked puzzled. What do you mean? I mean that the mistakes you and Marcus made, assuming decline, prioritizing safety over autonomy, making decisions without consultation, those mistakes are repeated by families everywhere. Elder care facilities need professional guidance for helping families navigate aging issues respectfully. And you want me to create those programs? Linda, you're a trained social worker with 15 years of experience in family counseling. You understand family dynamics, communication patterns, and conflict resolution. Those skills are exactly what this industry needs. I pulled out the job description I had prepared for Linda, Director of Family Services for Chen Healthcare Holdings, responsible for developing programs that educated adult children about respectful approaches to aging, trained facility staff in family communication, and created support systems for families adjusting to elder care transitions. The salary is $90,000 annually, plus benefits, plus equity participation in business growth. Linda studied the job description, reading requirements that matched her education and experience perfectly. Mom, you're offering me a job? I'm offering you the opportunity to prevent other families from making the assumptions that nearly damaged our relationship. Linda was quiet for a long moment, processing the career opportunity that had emerged from what she had initially approached as concern for her aging mother. Mom, are you sure about this? Are you sure you want to work with me professionally after how badly I misread your situation? Linda, the fact that you made those mistakes makes you the perfect person to help other families avoid them. You understand both the love that motivates family concern and the assumptions that can turn concern into control. But what if I'm not good at it? What if I can't develop effective programs? Then you'll learn, Linda, just like I learned how to build a healthcare business. Just like Marcus is learning how to implement innovative eldercare programming. Success isn't about already knowing everything. It's about being willing to grow. Linda looked around the elegant dining room where we were sitting, taking in the professional kitchen, the comfortable seating areas, the view of gardens where residents would grow their own food and flowers. Mom, this is really happening, isn't it? You've actually built something extraordinary. We've built something extraordinary, Linda. Your father designed the vision, I implemented the business model, Marcus is managing the operations, and now you can develop the family support systems that will make it sustainable. And what about the nursing home you originally wanted to put me in? I smiled, realizing that Linda had just asked the question that would complete her understanding of how thoroughly her assumptions about my needs had been transformed into opportunities for family collaboration. Sunset Manor is now our flagship facility for demonstrating family-centered elder care. The place you originally researched for my care is becoming a model for how families can support aging without sacrificing autonomy. That's incredible. It's poetic justice, Linda. The facility you selected to manage my decline is becoming the place where we teach other families how to support continued growth. As we shared dinner in the demonstration dining room, a meal prepared by the professional chef who would be training resident cooks, using ingredients from gardens that residents would tend in a space designed to feel like family dining rather than institutional feeding, Linda asked the question that would determine whether she was ready to join the mission. Robert and I had started. Mom, what do you need from me? How can I contribute to what you're building? Finally, the question I had been waiting for, not how can we take care of you, but how can we work together? Linda, I need you to help me change how society thinks about aging. I need you to develop programs that teach families how to honor autonomy while providing support. I need you to help create a model for aging that emphasizes continued potential instead of managed decline. And if I'm successful, then your children will inherit not just wealth, but a transformed approach to aging that honors dignity, supports independence, and creates opportunities for continued growth, instead of accepting limitation as inevitable. Linda was quiet for several minutes, processing the magnitude of what I was proposing. Mom, I accept your offer, but I want to add one condition. What's that? I want to start by developing a program specifically for adult children who have made the mistakes I made. I want to create education that helps families recognize capability instead of assuming decline. Linda, that's exactly what this industry needs. As dinner concluded and we prepared to leave the facility that would soon welcome its first residents, Linda asked one final question. Mom, When you were listening to Marcus and me plan your assisted living arrangements, what were you thinking? I was thinking that my daughter loved me enough to be concerned about my welfare, but didn't trust me enough to consult me about my preferences. And now? Now I'm thinking that my daughter is ready to learn how to love me without trying to manage me. That's fair, Linda said, hugging me with genuine warmth instead of the careful concern that had characterized our recent interactions. And Mom? Yes? Thank you for teaching me the difference. As we drove away from Meridian Center, I realized that the intervention my family had planned to manage my supposed decline had transformed into a collaboration that would benefit not just our family, but every family facing the challenges of aging with dignity. The nursing home they had selected for my care had become the headquarters for a movement that would change how society approached elder care. The concerns about my financial vulnerability had revealed a business empire that would provide security for generations. The assumptions about my diminished capabilities had been replaced by recognition of my continued potential for growth, contribution, and leadership. But most importantly, the relationship dynamics that had prioritized management over respect had been transformed into partnerships based on mutual recognition of capability and autonomy. 6 months later, I was standing in the lobby of Sunset Manor, not as a potential resident, but as the owner and visionary behind what had become the most sought-after elder care facility in the region. The renovation was complete, and the waiting list included over 400 families who wanted their aging relatives to experience the kind of dignified, enriching elder care that most people had never imagined possible. Linda had thrown herself into developing family education programs with the passion of someone who had discovered her true calling. Her workshops for adult children were booked months in advance, and she had been invited to speak at conferences about respectful approaches to aging and family support. Marcus had proven himself to be not just an excellent operations manager, but a visionary leader who understood how to implement innovative programming while maintaining the financial sustainability that allowed our mission to continue expanding. But the real measure of our success wasn't financial performance or industry recognition. It was the transformation in how our own family approached aging, independence, and mutual support. Grandma Betty, my granddaughter Sarah, said as she toured the facility during her college spring break, "This place is amazing. It's like a cross between a luxury resort and a university campus." Sarah was studying business and gerontology, preparing for a career in elder care innovation that would continue the work Robert and I had started. She represented the next generation of family members who would inherit not just wealth, but a commitment to aging with dignity. "Sarah, what do you think your great-grandfather would say about what we've built here?" "I think he'd say you exceeded his wildest dreams." "Actually, sweetheart, this is exactly what he dreamed. Robert designed every aspect of this model, from the financial strategy to the programming philosophy, to the architectural principles." We walked through the art studios where residents worked alongside professional artists, the teaching kitchens where retired chefs shared their expertise with both residents and community members, the library where university professors led seminars that were open to residents and their families. "Grandma, how many people does this facility serve?" "We have 120 residents, but our programming serves over 300 people when you include family members, community participants, and visiting students." "So it's not just elder care, it's community enrichment?" "Exactly, Sarah. We've proven that facilities designed around resident capabilities instead of resident limitations become resources for entire communities." As we completed our tour, Sarah asked the question that told me our family's transformation was complete and sustainable. "Grandma, what can I do to contribute to this work? Not how can I take care of you when you're older, but how can I help build the solutions our generation will need?" "Sarah, you can continue developing this model. You can help us expand internationally. You can research new approaches to aging that we haven't discovered yet, and the business will support that kind of innovation." "Sarah, this business generates enough profit to fund research, development, and expansion while providing excellent returns for investors and excellent care for residents. We've proved that doing good and making money aren't just compatible. They're mutually reinforcing." That evening, our family gathered for dinner at Meridian Center's main dining room. Not as visitors, but as partners in a mission that had transformed from elder care planning into community building. Linda presented her latest research on family dynamics and aging, showing how her education programs had reduced family conflict and improved satisfaction for both adult children and aging parents. Marcus shared operational data showing how resident-centered programming had improved health outcomes while reducing costs and increasing profitability across our entire facility network. Sarah discussed her senior thesis on innovative elder care models and her plans for graduate school research that would contribute to our ongoing development. You know, Linda said as dessert was served, when Marcus and I first approached Mom about assisted living, we thought we were solving a problem. What do you think now? I asked. Now I think we were creating problems by making assumptions instead of asking questions. And what questions should families ask? Questions about goals instead of limitations. Questions about preferences instead of needs. Questions about how to support continued growth instead of how to manage decline. Marcus added, "The biggest lesson I've learned is that elder care shouldn't be about housing elderly people. It should be about creating communities where aging adults can continue contributing while receiving the support they need." And what about you, Sarah? What have you learned from watching this family navigate aging issues? I've learned that aging is only a problem if you accept limitation as inevitable. If you approach aging as an opportunity for continued growth, then elder care becomes about creating possibilities instead of managing problems. As dinner concluded and we prepared to leave the facility that had emerged from what Linda had originally intended as my residential placement, I realized that Robert's vision had been fulfilled beyond what either of us had dared to hope. We hadn't just created financial security for our family, we had created a new model for aging that honored dignity, supported independence, and demonstrated that elder care could be about enhancement rather than management. But more importantly, we had transformed our family's approach to aging from fear and control to excitement and collaboration. "Mom," Linda said as we walked through the lobby, where new residents were checking in for their move to apartments they had chosen in communities they had helped design, "I have a confession." "What's that, sweetheart?" "When I first suggested assisted living, I was scared. I was scared of watching you decline, scared of making wrong decisions, scared of not being able to protect you. And now I'm excited. I'm excited about aging in a world where facilities like this exist. I'm excited about the possibilities we're creating for our own futures." Linda, that's the transformation Robert and I always hoped for. We wanted to change aging from something families feared into something families anticipated with excitement. As I drove home from the facility that Linda had originally selected for my care, the facility that had become the flagship for a new approach to elder care, I reflected on the journey that had brought us from intervention to collaboration, from management to partnership, from fear to excitement. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Grandma, I just realized something. You didn't just avoid the nursing home, you bought it and made it better." I texted back, "We didn't just avoid the nursing home, sweetheart. We transformed it into something worth choosing." The moral of this story: never underestimate someone who's been planning their own future while you're planning their care. Never assume that age means limitation, or that elder care means managed decline. And never ever think that the nursing home is the end of the story when it might just be the beginning of a revolution. That's how a family intervention became a business transformation. That's how concern for declining capabilities became recognition of continuing potential. That's how a nursing home recommendation became the headquarters for changing how society approaches aging. Life has a way of revealing that the people we want to protect often have more wisdom about their own needs than the people trying to protect them. Sometimes the best care plan is asking what someone wants instead of assuming what they need. Sometimes the solution to aging isn't management, it's empowerment. I have more stories to share about families who discovered that their assumptions about aging were limiting their ability to support the people they loved. Stories about elder care that honors dignity instead of managing decline. Stories about aging adults who refuse to accept limitation as inevitable. So pull up a chair, maybe in a facility that treats you as a person rather than a patient, and remember that sometimes the best nursing home is the one you own and operate according to your own values, because we're only just getting started, and you won't want to miss what comes next.